Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Tunnel Vision, a show brought to you by USCFootball.com. I'm your host, Keely, Eure, joined by Ryan Abraham and Shotgun Spratling. We have a fun show for you guys today. We have had a lot of media availability with USC's coaches and players, so some new things on the horizon. We have a lot to talk about. We'll recap the week that we've had so far. Today is the day is a quote up on the below me, because that's what USC's defensive coordinator said this morning, because USC had their first full pads practice, I believe at 4 p.m. So we'll get into that and give you all the training camp updates. And then the Trojan talent rank. That's something, Ryan, I'm going to have to toss over to you. You wrote that story about where USC ranks in their composite talent ranking, something 247 Sports does. So we'll dive into that. And of course, you can call us 512-4-TUNNEL, and we will answer your questions and your comments, whatever you want to tell us. And then you can tweet at us, #TunnelVision, and I'll put your tweet up on the screen. We're having some technical difficulties, so I can't put your questions up on the screen, but Chuck and I will be reading them. We'll follow along. Don't worry about that. I believe we are live on Periscope and Facebook. I'm trying to get YouTube to work. YouTube's a little tricky sometimes, so thanks for watching us on a different platform if you're doing so. But guys, like I said, a lot to catch up on since we've had so many pressers starting Friday and 3 or 4 this week. 4 total this week, 3 so far this week. First off, training camp. What you've heard from the coaches, what are your overall thoughts? Ryan, let's start with you.
Yeah, sorry for the YouTube people. I know we have some issues with that, but I'm going to be monitoring Periscope as well.
Cool.
And I keep trying to click on something, and the ad keeps moving it. Technical difficulty. So I'll try to monitor what you're going on with Periscope. But yeah, it's been really interesting to hear from Clay Helton a couple times. We've heard some offensive coaches and players with Graham Harrell, and then also with this morning at Todd Orlando. I think the biggest takeaway, and I love the instant analysis you guys did this morning after the early morning interview. We got to hear what Todd Orlando was saying leading up to the day of the full pads practice and the first time they're going to tackle. And I loved how he was calling those other practices, almost called them non-practices where they're non. He didn't really put a lot of stock into what was going on. And just every other word phrase out of his mouth was, flying to the football, being physical, tackling. It just seemed like that's what he wanted to see, that you can see guys do stuff in T-shirts and shorts and helmets, but really when the pads come on, is a guy faster when he has pads on and he's running to chase somebody down, or does he run a half step slower than what he would normally? And I felt like just listening to him talk, it was a different mentality going in to practice. And if the defense is going to play like that, I think that can carry over to the offense as well. Graham Harrell, I think he was saying the right things. They got a great receiving core. You got the same running backs back. Obviously, you got Keaton Slovis. Not a lot of depth there. But you feel pretty good about the offensive skill positions. And he was pretty positive on the offensive line, which is definitely going to be one of the biggest questions. But that's more of a kind of a you're just evolving a little bit, going from year one that was highly effective, and then to year 2, you're going to clean up some things. Things are supposed to get better. You got so many of those same pieces coming back. Elijah Vera Tucker was a big one. So the offense was a little different. It's more of they're kind of morphing from version 1 to version 2.0. This is beta on the defensive side of the ball, and it just feels like the operating system that Todd Orlando is using is a lot different than what we've seen in the years past.
Shotgun, what about you? What are your thoughts?
Obviously, listening to Todd Orlando today, it was a breath of fresh air for a lot of USC fans. That's the comments we got on the message boards and stuff, talking about the running and hitting and all those things, which he also said during the spring before, they got out on the practice field, but this is the first time we got to talk to him since he's actually had the players on the field. He didn't want to make any judgments about guys, how they looked, the first couple of days. Ryan tried to ask him who's standing out, and he was like, get back to me in 4 or 5 days. He didn't want to say anything. He's like, hey, they all look good in T-shirt and shorts. But what do you look like when someone's chasing you, or what do you look like when you're trying to chase somebody down, you're trying to fend off a block, those type of things. Those are a lot different. And he used the quote, and I thought it was interesting, the analogy. He said some guys are 4.6 running, and then when someone's chasing them, they're avoiding someone, they're running a 4.9. And then the opposite, some guys are a 4.9 on track day, on the testing day, but then when they're chasing after somebody to go make a play, they run a 4.6 on the field. So that's what he was waiting to make any judgments based on. He wanted to see him in pads, wanted to see them get at it, and he was super excited. He was actually there before the media call about 5 minutes early, and he's like, "Can we just go ahead and get started now? You guys ready?" He's like, "Oh, we got to wait on people. Okay, that's fine. I got it." But you could tell he was just super excited and amped up to get today going and get rolling. And I think that energy that he brings, and also Dante Williams, Vic So'oto, those guys that are bringing on the defensive side, I think it's infectious for the entire team, and especially in a year when there's been so many trials and tribulations of just getting on the field. And this year when you're not going to have fans in the stands, so maybe we'll see some family. That's coming out a little bit with the Pac-12, but with no fans in the stand, it's going to be, can you create your own energy on the sidelines? And I think these guys are going to help that defensive side of the ball, and I think that'll translate the offensive side as well.
Mm-hmm. Now, we also heard from Graham Harrell on Tuesday. What did you guys hear from him that stood out to you guys? I know there's a lot of talk from him himself about year two, what his system does in year two, and it seems like they're anticipating a jump. What exactly does that look like in your eyes?
I've heard the year two jump so many times from everybody. It better be a jump. Like, if there's no jump, if it looks exactly the same, like, what about this jump?
A little speed bump.
It's like, yeah, a little speed bump. Like, everyone's talked about it. I mean, just how upbeat he was about the offensive line, where we're all saying that's the biggest question. He didn't seem to have a whole lot of concerns there. And the first thing he mentioned was Elijah Vera Tucker coming back. And I mean, it's almost like getting two positions back when you know he's there. Or I wouldn't say that. Losing Elijah Vera Tucker was kind of like replacing two positions. But getting him back, you're probably solidifying your left tackle spot. I mean, if you feel good with, Brett Nealon, who was, I hate those, the watch list awards, but he's a Remington, center watch list guy. And I think Andrew Voorhees, you're going to have one of the guard spots, and Jalen McKenzie, out at the right tackle spot, and maybe like a Justin Dedich. I think you feel pretty good about those five guys, or maybe you one or two guys kind of replace some of them. But I think they feel a lot better about the makeup of the offensive line with Elijah Vera Tucker there, sort of kind of holding down that left tackle spot. So he seemed pretty optimistic about that. He loved what he has seen from Drake London and what he could be able to do, as far as potentially have his hand on the ground and block some people. He's a big enough body that can do things like that. So, yeah, he was pretty upbeat. But, yeah, I want to see this 2-year bump thing, because I've heard it so much. I'm like, all right, there'll be some kind of bump here. Because I was really impressed with what he did in year one. I don't know how much of a bigger bump you can get to year two. We'll see.
Shadi, what is your thoughts about the bump first? And then I know you have other thoughts as well.
Well, I think looking at the bump, I think one of the things that I thought was interesting to hear them talk about, Keaton Slovis touched on this as well, is that you can do some different things now. Now that you got all the basics kind of down, because their offense is so simple, now you can add some wrinkles to it. And that's what it kind of sounded like, that they would be able to play off of some things that they did in the past. Now they'll be able to implement them in a little bit different way to create some variety to the offense that maybe some of the defenses didn't see last year. So maybe that adds to it. I think that you're looking for how good the offensive line plays as to how good this offense can take that jump. And Graham Harrell talked about how he thinks the offensive line can push the line forward, can move some men up front. And if that's the case, that changes a lot of things. If they can run the ball, and he used the word efficiently when he talked about running the ball. If they can run the ball efficiently, he didn't say run the ball well. He didn't say if we can run for 100 yards a game. He said if we can run it efficiently. I think that's the difference there is That means if teams want to try to drop 8, if you put 6 yards up on them, chunk that every single time they try to drop, then I think you're changing, what defenses can do, and you can force them out of some defenses, which USC wasn't great at doing last year. Now they made some adjustments to the drop 8, and they were able to find ways to beat it. But if you could run the ball at teams when you want to, that changes, what you can do on offense. Definitely, it changes the whole dynamic for you.
Mm-hmm. And the interesting thing you and I talked about it on Instant Shotgun is the tight end role and what Drake London kind of does in that space. Graham Harrell was asked about inside receivers and how the line is kind of blurred with inside receivers and tight ends. And so coming into year 2, it's like, is he going to try and revert back to a more traditional tight end role? Where does Drake London fit into this? And he had glorious praise for Drake London. Harrell seemed like kind of how he talked about Keaton Slovis the beginning of last fall camp. Lots of praise for Drake London. Shadi, how do you see Drake really fitting into this offense in year 2?
Yeah, Graham Harrell mentioned that the line has been blurred, especially in the NFL. And you see guys like Travis Kelce, you see those dynamic tight ends they're basically too big for a DB to cover and too fast for a linebacker to cover. And I think that's what he sees in Drake London. He says he's a matchup nightmare for defenses, trying to figure out how to play him when he plays on the inside. Now, does USC keep him on the inside? They move him outside? I think some of that is going to be determined by how much McCoy develops, how much you can use Gary Bryant, where you're moving him around to, because he did say they have been moving Gary Bryant around in these early practices. He was also very effusive in his praise of Brew McCoy and talking about him. So, that leads me to believe that he thinks he's got some dynamic weapons that can do some different things and cause those nightmare matchups. And then you have Tyler Vaughns and Amon-Ra St. Brown, who are just super consistent for you. And Amon-Ra St. Brown is just putting up ridiculous highlights that, the few short clips we're seeing from practices. He's just burning DBs and some of USC's best DBs with his elite route running ability and ability to catch the ball. So I think that USC is going to have some weapons, and I think Graham Harrell's seeing that, and I think that's one of the things he's looking at when he says that he sees a bump coming in the second year of this offense. Not necessarily just that everyone's going to be so much better at the offense itself, but he's seeing, the playmakers he's got, and if they each take a little incremental step, how much that's going to improve the offense as a whole.
Well, I think the thing we forget about, and Ryan, you and I talked about this in our offensive preview, is that Keaton Slovis wasn't deemed the starter last season. He had to learn on the fly as a true freshman that played in a high school team that wasn't that good. So it was a big learning curve. I mean, how much do you think Keaton will have more confidence under his belt now that he has more experience and another year under Graham Harrell?
Yeah, I mean, you have to be impressed what you saw from Keaton Slovis last year, because he was thrown into things. And sometimes there's a really important role. I don't know, you get a job somewhere and all of a sudden, the CEO, or maybe it's like you could watch like an old war movie if we're going to do something like that. Like
okay.
You're like the private that did something really good. You get up to like corporal or something. I don't know all the ranks and everything. And, you're it's World War II, you're in the trenches, and all of a sudden the sergeant gets killed and all these people in front of you, and you're in charge. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, this kid that was just out of basic training is now running some regiment or whatever, and he's out there and doing a really good job. But, you're learning on the fly. You're probably not going to do everything exactly right, but you've got the leadership skills. You've got enough know-how that you can go through and figure out the problems as they go. It's not always going to go smoothly. Yeah, there's a great game plan, but you got to go through and kind of figure out on the fly and lead the people behind you. And I think that's what Keaton Slovis was able to do. Now he gets to go to offensive training school and figure everything out and go into it knowing he's going to be a leader going into that next battle. And I feel knowing that he has that knowledge behind him, he should be a lot more effective. And he was highly effective at what he was doing, but it felt more gunslingery, like he just was thrown out there and had to do things. He gets hurt for a little while, and that might have even been an opportunity to kind of regroup after he hit with a concussion, I believe it was, and comes out for a week or two, and then is able to regroup and come back. But now you've had all this time off, and I feel like a better command of the offense, a better understanding of the people that are around him and what he needs to do. And I think this year especially, it's a short season, it's paramount that he remains healthy. There's probably not going to be a lot of opportunities for him to ever run, and I mean, you don't even want to see that. You don't want to put him in harm's way at all, because you got 2 scholarship quarterbacks, and that's it. So I don't care about that first down. Just keep Keaton Slovis. If I'm USC, number one priority is keep Keaton Slovis healthy. Otherwise, like, don't worry about getting that extra yard. Get out of bounds, slide, whatever you got to do. Do not get hit.
Yeah. And this was a shocking. I know you want to jump in for 1 second, but last year we have done the tallies. USC quarterback came out 5 times in 2019, and that was with an Austin Jackson, a Drew Richmond, Elijah Vera Tucker at guard, which is his home position. Is there concern going into this next season where this is a less experienced offensive line, and like Ryan just said, you need to keep your quarterback healthy just because that depth is so shallow?
Yeah, definitely. I think that that's definitely a concern, keeping the quarterback. But I think year 2 for Keaton Slovis as well, that he learned when I need to get rid of the football, maybe throw it away, when to try to keep a play alive. If it's third down in a critical situation, he's probably going to try to do that. But if it's first down, you're already, at the 40-yard line or something, maybe not take that hit potentially and just get rid of it, and we'll live to play the next down. Now, maybe he's not setting the NCAA records or competing for the NCAA completion percentage title this season, but maybe that's better for USC in the long run because he's staying healthier and taking less hits. And also, I think having an extra year of being in the weight program at USC to be able to add a little bit of strength, from the neck muscles down, just so he can absorb the hits a little bit more. And he doesn't, if he has improved his neck muscles in particular and the shoulder muscles, so he doesn't have that whiplash effect, which is where that concussion came from against Utah, slinging his head back and hitting the ground. So, those things I think in year 2 are going to be only more beneficial for him as well. So I think that it's not just him, I think he's going to be more confident in the offense, but I think he also knows when to do some certain things and when not to do some things that will only help him as well. I think there's a lot of things to be optimistic about with this offense. And, I'm actually coming around a little bit on this offensive line, even though we haven't seen them.
What changed for you?
There's still going to be huge question marks, but I'm worrying a little bit less about it. One, because you get Elijah Vera Tucker back. I think that's huge, obviously. But with the positive reports that Andrew Voorhees is moving around, that was a question mark coming into the spring. Was he going to be healthy? He's got over 1,500 snaps in his career. I don't think people realize how much he's actually played. Yeah. Now, he struggled early in his career, but I think him sitting out last year and having to watch, I think he's going to come back with a renewed vigor. And the positive reports of Liam Douglas, I think that's just adding an extra piece to the depth portion there. Whereas I was really worried that they were going to get 5 at one point. I was worried about can you get 5 guys out there that you can trust? Now it looks like maybe you're getting a 7 and 8, and some positive reports from those freshmen. I'm not putting too much stock into the what Graham Harrell and what some of the guys are saying about the freshmen already, but I think they have a chance to be a little bit further along than normal freshmen would be, just because of the delayed season. They were able to get in and be a part of the weight program in the summer, and now for a couple extra months than they would have normally been as a fall enrollee. So I think there's some positives there. You don't want one of those guys having to start. I think that's a bad sign for you. But, if you have to throw them in an injury situation with a sprained ankle or something, maybe you feel a little bit better about it. So I'm feeling a little bit better about the offensive line. Still not going to the point where I feel confident in them, but a little bit better.
That's some big optimism from you, though, Shotgun.
We
not used to it.
Maybe it also is because I haven't seen them. If I'd seen them, then maybe I have a different opinion. But because we
blind optimism is what you're saying.
Yeah. A little bit.
Okay.
I think it was Ladera dude on Periscope said line cook to head chef. So we have a food analogy there.
Yeah.
I like that. So
you're rusty, Ryan.
Thanks, Ladera dude. And Irish Ice says, "Are you saying JT Daniels coming back?" No, he's at Georgia. So they only got 2. They only have 2 scholarship guys. So JT Daniels is gone.
Also, you should point out, though, that they do have Mo Hassan, who is a former starter at Vanderbilt for a couple of games. So he has started games in the SEC. He's played in the SEC. He's a walk-on. He's going to be the third-string guy. No, you don't want to get to him, obviously. You don't want to get to Matt Fink if you don't have to, because Keaton Slovis is an elite talent. But I think you feel a little bit better about that than, the Brad Aoki being the third guy, or, whoever the third or fourth
the backup kickers that was
walk-on quarterbacks are there.
Yeah. Now, in the same vein, as far as USC's run game, what is your expectations, just given the fact that USC really had to sell out to the air raid in the second half of the season just because there were so many injuries? It doesn't look like the group itself is 100% health-wise coming into this season, or at least coming into training camp. I feel like every offseason there's a renewed hope that USC's run game will be effective, especially when they need it to be. What are your expectations heading into 2020?
See, I think if you look at the end of the game, I think you're going to see some pretty good rushing numbers for USC if the running backs stay healthy. The issue being, this is not a hard schedule right now. Looking at, and we'll talk about the talent stuff and which teams are left on USC's schedule. The ASU game is probably the toughest game right out of the gate, on the road against Utah. But there's a lot of teams that I think this offense is going to put up a ton of points. So if Keaton Slovis comes out, he threw for 4 touchdowns in the first quarter against Arizona State last year, and then they kind of hung on to win. You do something like that this year. He throws for 4 touchdowns in the first quarter against Colorado. They're probably going to be running the football quite a bit. And at the end of the day, you might have like 220 yards rushing or something like that. I feel like there's just a lot of soft spots on this really short schedule. You're probably going to have a really effective running game. Does that mean if they were playing Alabama and Notre Dame and Oregon and Washington that the running game would have been effective? I'm not sure yet. I just don't know. But the way the schedule is and the kind of talent USC has, I feel pretty confident they're going to be able to run the football, even if, just if because you build a big lead with the passing game and you can run the ball later in the game. But I don't think the schedule is difficult enough that you can say, oh, they're not going to be able to run the football this year. They have enough talent; they should be able to do that.
I think they'll put up good yardage. The question's going to come down to those third and ones. Can you pick up that yard when that they're probably going to be running the ball? Those are the big question marks. Can you get a push up front? And Graham Harrell thinks they can. He thinks that the second year in the offensive line, and granted, they are all older offensive linemen. So you should be able to trust those guys to move guys forward a little bit. I mean, you look across the board and it's basically, a red shirt sophomore to seniors on that line. So, guys that are 3 to 5 years in the program. So I think you should be able to be able to move some guys up front and be able to pick up those yards and help the running backs. Because the running backs, that's one thing. Their yards after contact were all really good last year. They were good the year before. Akacentric Ware was great at it, one of the best in the Pac-12. However, there were way too many times when you're getting a 2-yard gain with 4 yards after contact. Which, if you guys do the math, you're getting hit in the backfield. That's not good. So that's going to be the question. If you can give those guys 2 yards and then get the 4 yards after contact, 6-yard gains, that's a huge difference. So I think that's going to be the question for the run game. Can you get a push and create something? And then do they add some wrinkles? Says it took a little while for them to add some wrinkles to their run game where, there were times when I would be like, that they're running this way, they're running that way.
Calling it on the sideline.
And now, going back, sometimes they might have been trying to bait the other team into it. I went back and watched our film study of the Notre Dame game, and some of the things that Notre Dame was trying to do against USC. USC put in some counters to what they normally do to try to jerk up the defense a little bit. So maybe that played into it, or maybe that was just an in-game adjustment, and they should have been adjusting that a little bit earlier. That's a question mark for me a little bit. But if you can get the guys healthy, that's number one. Keely mentioned at top. We haven't really touched on it, but Vi Malapai, hamstring injury. He's slowed. Marquise Stepp coming into camp, still a little tentative on the foot that he injured last year, which that's it's basically 12 months ago, and he's still not fully cleared there. And then Stephen Carr, it looked like they took him a little light the first couple of days from the pictures and a little bit of video that we saw, so can't really say that for true. And then Keenan Kristen, is a smaller guy, so you don't want him having an overburdened workload either. So you got to get those guys healthy, and I think if you do, you feel really confident in that stable. You got 4 guys that proved they can be the guy last year, at different times. So if you can get healthy and you can move guys forward a little bit, the run game can be effective, and it should put up good yardage numbers at least, just because, like Ryan said, the schedule is going to be pretty soft.
Mm-hmm. Now, flipping back to the defense, just talking to Todd Orlando, it was really interesting just his philosophy. And he was asked about, every stop he's had as defensive coordinator that first year, the defense sees a jump in productivity. And he was asked, well, why does that happen? And he said, it's not really necessarily scheme. It's just because there's a culture change. It's internal. And so I asked Shotgun about this. I'm going to go to you first, Ryan. What do you think that will do for this USC defense who has had years of Clancy Pendergast and probably just needs to change the pace to begin with?
Yeah, sometimes you just need a change of scenery. You need something different. You can get in these ruts. You get a certain way of doing things, and I think that has been one of the issues we've seen with Clay Helton as the head coach, is that sometimes you get complacent with what you have. We talked about a number of times. After the 2017 season when USC won the Pac-12, no coaching changes were made. Even though there were some pretty glaring problems, USC won the Pac-12, but didn't look good against Notre Dame, didn't look good against Ohio State. You can become kind of complacent. You get the players sort of get used to the way things are done. Clancy Pendergast has been around there for a while. He's been effective at times, not as effective at other times, but sometimes you just need something new. I think I've used this analogy before. I live in a complex, and there's a bunch of units, and we have gardeners that'll come and clean things up. After like a year or two, it's sort of like, it's good in the beginning, and then it's just sort of like, they're just not doing a really good job. You get a new gardener, and everything's different. It's like, oh yeah, now they've cut this right. You get the new, just something new, and it just changes things up a little bit. And I think when you go from where there was more of a sort of protection of the players, making sure guys aren't getting hurt, there wasn't a priority on. The number one thing is we got to tackle, so we are ready to tackle in games. And I think with Todd Orlando, that's what his number one priority is. He doesn't care about all the other stuff. He wants to see you have pads, he has pads, run real fast at each other, and who goes down first. And I think that's just the kind of attitude he's bringing to it. And it's a different mentality, I think, for the players. And I get it. Wherever he's gone, maybe they weren't doing things that way. And that's why you see the kind of a quick turnaround. Now, you'll probably get used to that at some point too, but it is a very different sort of feel, at least from what we've heard from the defensive coaches of the past to the defensive coaches right now. And if we can feel that, I certainly think the players can feel that. So I get what he's saying. It's just changing the culture a little bit. And I think it's a good thing for USC. They want to get back to, forget that the sanctions happen, forget that you're trying to protect your roster, go forward, be a physical football team, use the athletes, these 4- and 5-star guys. You got to run the defensive side of the ball. Let them run and hit people. And that's what you want to do. You're going to make plays on defense. Everyone has to do everything right on defense. On offense, you kind of need, everyone's got to be on the right page. On defense, one guy goes crazy and makes a big play. He might even be in the right place, but he's going, a million miles an hour and he makes the play. I think you want to see a little bit more of that. And I think with Todd Orlando, that's the mentality he's instilling in the players.
Shotgun, you know how fired up Todd Orlando was for today's full pads practice. Are you buying what he's selling? He says the right things, but, there's always coach speak. Do you think it'll transfer?
I think just the way you listen to the players talk about him, and, Elijah Griffin was on Trojans Live, and, he talked about how every time he talks to Orlando, he's learning something new. With Dante Williams, same thing as far as, the defensive back play. So I think that when you hear the players talk about it, I think that they're buying in. And that's the big question, not whether, the coach says the right things, but if the players are buying in. And I think the energy that entire defensive staff brings, I think is only going to elevate that defense. And then I think it's going to, translate to the offensive side, because if the defense is bringing it every day and Orlando likes to mix up pressures and looks, and Graham Harrell even talked about how he thinks that's going to help, help the offensive line as they develop and try to mesh into a unit, and also Keaton Slovis identifying things. If they're bringing it every day and they're hitting you in the mouth as an offensive line, you're going to get mad. You want to go at them too. So I think it's only going to amp up the productivity at practice and the energy level there, which is great for USC. So it's hard to say if it's happening or not since we can't actually see it, but it feels like from what people are saying that that's the case, and not just what the coaches are saying, but also everyone around it. And I think that the reason why they've been able to make that big jump, and what Todd Orlando was trying to say, that it's not so much that my scheme is great, but that you kind of change the culture in the locker room a little bit, and you get guys that are willing to, go full speed at all times, rather than guys that are, worried about pulling up or anything when a play's away from them. So I think that's kind of the difference there, and I think that's part of it. And he even said, I think that you're not going to out scheme, you're not going to fool everyone with your scheme. So you're going to need guys to kind of to go make plays and run through that wall for you.
Yeah. Now, as far as personnel goes, the linebacker depth, is that a concern for you guys at all? Just because we were expecting Jordan Iosefa to be healthy, to be a veteran guy at that linebacker position, and now he's out with his third knee surgery in almost a year. And then you have Solomon Tuliolapupu, who finally got that foot taken care of after 2 years, and now he's out with a knee injury. You could tell Clay Helton was just so heartbroken about that development. But those are two guys who you were hoping you could have in that depth chart, and now it looks like, and Todd Orlando said as much, you're going to really rely on Palaie, Nayotote, and then Raylan Goforth and Kanai Mauga. What are you two expecting from those three?
Yeah, so it looks like a battle for Kanai Mauga and Raylan Goforth, and I think we've seen some really good things from both those guys. Palaie, he's pretty comfortable keeping him in the same spot, and we have to kind of see what that front seven is sort of looking like. We know, Drake Jackson, there's going to be more of a, he's considered that hybrid outside linebacker, but mostly he's going to be rushing the quarterback, hand on the ground. He can drop back in the coverage if he needs to. So I'm curious to see. We haven't really got to watch a whole lot of practices of what that front is going to look like and if they need more depth. But I feel like he's going to have a little bit more focus on the linebackers because he's a linebacker guy, right? He likes coaching the linebackers. And I don't know, it just always seemed to me like it was a forgotten group for Clancy Pendergast. There was more focus on the secondary than those linebacker spots. So depth, I think there's a bit of a concern there, but the guy, I think he feels pretty comfortable with at least those three kind of rotating around.
Shotgun?
I think it'll be interesting because linebacker has been a position, especially under Clancy Pendergast, where he got two guys in the middle and they stayed there basically the entire year. A guy like Raylan Goforth, we saw some big plays from him early in camp last year, and we expected that's a guy that's going to get in the mix. I hadn't even heard from a couple of the coaches that were really impressed by him. I'm like, oh, this guy's going to work his way in and maybe he'll get a couple series a game type of thing. Never happened. And that's been the case, throughout. Besides Palaie and Nayotote, who was basically the number one defensive player in the country, you haven't really seen young guys get in there and get some experience. You see a guy like Levi Jones or any of these high-profile linebackers that USC's got in the past. So I think this year maybe you'll see a little bit more rotation. And a guy like Ryan, you talked about Todd Orlando kind of wants guys to just fly to the ball, and if you get out of your lane, out of your assignment, every once in a while, but you're making plays. That's Palaie and Nayotote. He's a guy that just look back at the hit he put on Laviska Shenault and knocked out both of them. He flies around the ball. You want him to be doing that. You want him to be going downhill. You want him to be attacking. And that's one of the reasons why Dan Weber last year was championing for him to be the guy coming off the edge, and be a down lineman as a defensive end potentially, because he's so much better when he's attacking instead of trying to read and react everything. And I think that's the next step in this defense is they feel like Orlando said they feel like they have 95% of it installed. But now when you put on the pads, can you get out of the hesitation of making sure you're doing the right thing and instead just going and doing it? And he told them, he said, I don't want you guys to fail at practice. This is practice. Go fail and fail big. Go after it and go try to make a big play and then learn from it. If you don't make that play, okay, what do I need to do differently, or what are my limitations? You need to know those things going in to a game. And when you don't ever go full speed like in the past, it's hard to know that. It's hard to know, okay, I can pick off that pass. Okay, no, I can't. That's going to be a touchdown if I try to make that play. So those are the type of things where when you're going 70%, 70% of your full speed, those are things that you can miss out on. So I think that if they are going full speed, and again, we're going to try to get as many reports as we can, both on and off the record from sources as we go through camp until hopefully we're able to see some of camp ourselves. But we're going to try to find out as much as we can. But that's what you're hoping to see in these practices, and that's what it sounds like they're going to do. We'll see if that's actually the case.
Yeah, I did love that. They just go fail in practice. Go fast, go hard. Do whatever you need to do. Go out there and just go like a bat out of hell. And then if it's right, that's great. If it's not, you still might do something good. You still might disrupt the play. So I love that. And I think if you practice like that, you can play like that.
Yeah, and not figuring out on Saturdays, which it kind of felt like USC was doing at times. So
especially
we learn to tackle at games like no.
Yep, exactly.
Especially early in the season. hey, you don't have that opportunity to wait till a couple games in. Your hardest game on what is scheduled so far is Arizona State to open the season, and they've got some dynamic players there, and especially at quarterback. If you don't tackle Jaden Daniels, he's going to lengthen out a play and then create some big plays out of it if you don't tackle him in the backfield.
Yep. Now, as far as Drake Jackson goes, Todd Orlando was asked about that today. He's listed in the media guide as an outside linebacker, and he's dropped some weight, so the eyebrows were raised. And Todd Orlando said that that's a projection. It's a hybrid role. Basically, he can attack the quarterback but also drop into coverage. But he said the caveat is that if there's an elite pass rusher, of course, you're going to want that guy going at the quarterback more so than dropping into coverage. But I posed this question to Shotgun, and I'm going to pose it to you, Ryan. If Drake Jackson is out for an extended period of time in fall camp, which he's expected to be with that hamstring injury, are you throwing Drake Jackson kind of into the mix closer to game time? How are you figuring out his role in this defense when he's not 100%?
I think it's one of those things where, if we get a food analogy, it's sort of like you ever watch Chopped, and then there's like, you have a basket and there's all this other stuff in there. And yeah, you have like an idea for what you want to do with those first three weird ingredients. You got like rutabaga and whatever, like some salmon stuff, but there's like a ragu, like ribeye, like there's this awesome steak, like that's what you're going to base your whole dinner around. Like it's like that last ingredient you're going to pull out, like whatever the other ones are, they're going to fit into what this ingredient is so good, this is what we're going to use. He's that ingredient. Like he's going to be the one that you want to focus everything around, that even if you've made some other dish, you've made like sushi on this side, but you still got this we're going to serve sushi with this great steak because it's so great. So whatever you got to do, put him in there and go after the quarterback. And I think he fits that mold that Todd Orlando wants. You're going to put him into the game, and no matter what it is going on behind him, he has his hand on the ground. I don't care if he's 245 pounds or 275 pounds, what he was last year, this year. Go get the quarterback. And I think he's going to be such a disruptor that it's not going to matter if he misses a couple of weeks of fall practice. So that's one dude that you're not going to have to worry about. He's the star ingredient. He's the one that you're going to want to disrupt an offense. You want to make a quarterback uncomfortable. You want to put pressure on an offensive scheme. And I think he's a guy that can do that. So not someone I would be concerned about, even if he misses most of fall camp.
That was a parabola of an analogy there. I didn't know where it was going. It was like it was leaving the park, and then suddenly it came back down. You landed that one. That was good. With Drake Jackson, he's lost 30 pounds. It's not an insignificant amount of weight that he's lost. Different body type right now, and they wanted to play that hybrid position. But I think, and I talked about this on Instant Analysis, I think it's going to be like Porter Gustin. It's going to be like Uchenna Nwosu, where they are outside linebackers, and both, and Uchenna Nwosu is still playing this position in the NFL, but you're going to be rushing the passer 98% of the time. Now, with Drake Jackson, I think you like his coverage skills better than either Porter Gustin or Uchenna Nwosu. He's got great hands. We saw that in the spring showcase last year when, he had the interception. I think he can do some unique things with just the athlete that he is. And I think they're going to design some things around him. And I think that's what Ryan's analogy finally brought it back to, is that you're going to design the rest of that plate around that nice steak. And I think that's what Drake Jackson is going to do. Now, if he's getting some rush on the passer, then, teams are suddenly going to have to double team him. They're going to move the tight end over to Chip. And when you do that, that's when you drop him back in coverage. You bring a blitz on the other side. They're weak. That's when you attack and you get some pressure from the other side as well, and potentially, force the quarterback into some errant throws they don't want to make. So I think that if he gets healthy first, and that's a question we ask way too much with USC. Mm-hmm. If he gets healthy, he's got a hamstring issue right now. They're going to bring him along slowly, so I expect him not to really do anything for at least 2 weeks. They want to make sure he's ready for the beginning of the season. But then they need to get him back at least for a week of full speed action so they can see what he can actually do, because it's new system for him, new player for Todd Orlando. He's got to see in action what the player can do himself.
Mm-hmm. One last question, then I'm probably going to dive into questions. We did get to talk to Brandon Keely and Marlon Tuipulotu this morning, and they were asked about their good buddy Jay Tufele, who decided to opt out and leave for the NFL. That's a big loss. That's how they described it. It was a big loss for USC's defensive front. How do you make up a guy like Jay Tufele? I know Brandon Keely said that the burden is on him, and Brandon Keely is someone who I think USC has always seen the potential and hasn't really gotten 100% from him yet. Do you think this is the year that we'll see Brandon Keely really reach his full potential?
I think you're going to have to. I think, you had those three big guys that you felt comfortable with, and Jay Tufele was, the most prominent of all of them, and I think the most effective. It was all, he could stuff the middle, but he would also, put some numbers up in the stat sheet. And I think both of those guys are going to have to step up and bring a little bit more to the table. And they're, it's a good friend of all of them. I think it was a close room. I asked Marlon about, what practice was like, and it wasn't all that different, but I feel like there's a big opportunity here for them, but you sort of there was like a safety net, like they could go in there and try to make a play, but if they didn't, like Jay was always there and he could kind of fix things. Well, that guy's gone. The fixer is now no longer there. You're going to be, there's a lot more on your shoulders. We haven't seen, yet at least some of the more interior defensive linemen, some of those younger guys step up. It's going to be these veterans that this Todd Orlando front's going to rely on. So I think both of them are going to have to play a lot better. You want them to stay healthy. I know Brandon Keely had some kind of stomach issue early on in camp, but they had him at the Zoom call this morning, so I assume he's fine now. But yeah, they both need to kind of step up, and you want to see them get similar stat lines to what we were seeing with Jay Tufele. Or is it, do you block a field goal? Do you, recover a fumble and return it for a touchdown? Do you get those plays every once in a while that that's a real big, playmaker like we saw with Jay Tufele?
Yeah.
Yeah, Marlon's had a couple of those really impact plays where, chasing down plays to the outside and knocking a fumble out early in one game last year. So we've seen it from him. He's been a consistent force. I think he's going to be even, he's going to be one of the biggest gainers from this being a shorter season, because we've actually seen him decline in the second half of the season the last 2 years. So with a shorter season, maybe he stays fresher for longer in the season. And, we see those impact plays he was making a lot early in the season last year. We see those throughout the entirety of the year this year. But they're going to have to replace Jay Tufele collectively. That's the same thing that Todd Orlando said. Because one, for defensive tackles, they're not playing 70 snaps a play. They're not in every snap. So you need guys that are going to be rotating. But it's going to be on Brandon Keely. He's the main guy that needs to step up. And normally I would say he's definitely going to step up this year because he's a senior. And, this is the money year. He's got to go, show NFL scouts, but he gets extra year eligibility. So that brings that point of conversation just a bit. But I think this is a great opportunity for him. He's got unique athleticism for a guy as big as him, but he needs to be consistent. He's shown that he can get to the passer. Can you do it consistently? He's shown he can be this big run stopper in the middle and just be a tank that nobody can move. Do it consistently. That's going to be the task for him this year. And if he does that, then now you can rotate those other guys in. And if you get some guys stepping up a little bit there as well, then you replace Jay Tufele. I think it's going to be a big loss, though, that you lose Jacob Lichtenstein, especially because they want to have 3 down linemen across the front. And he's a guy that 2 years ago was making plays at the end of the season for them. He opts out, as well as on the offensive side, offensive linemen Frank Martin and Bernard Shermer. So some depth hits on both the lines a little bit there. Yeah. So that means somebody like Caleb Tremblay, Nick Figueroa,
yep.
Connor Murphy. Connor Murphy's a guy that I think can step up as well. A new defensive system, new coach to be under the tutelage of. We've seen a couple times he's shown some flashes. He's gotten some starts in the past. Can he step up and maybe take over a role? Mm-hmm. We'll see.
We shall see, indeed. I'm going to jump into questions. I'll probably circle back to any final thoughts or things that stood out to you this week that we can circle back to. But first off, we have a couple of Brew McCoy questions. Francisco says, is Brew McCoy playing this season? And John Laub says, do you guys think we could see Brew on defense or special teams this year?
Maybe special teams, but yeah, he's definitely going to play. Like we mentioned earlier, Graham Harrell had high praise for him. I don't think they're going to use him on the defensive side of the ball. There's just not enough wide receivers right now. So, and a couple guys get hurt. They only got 8 guys on scholarship from our count. So I don't think you're going to see him on the defensive side of the ball.
Oh, but I want it to happen so bad.
You do. I mean, it's not like I would love it, but If they had like 12 wide receivers on scholarship, that's one thing. They got 8 right now. So,
but how many elite pass rushers do they have on the other side? So maybe there's still a possibility, especially with Drake Jackson being injured. Maybe you see something up. Don't rule it out just yet. New coaching staff, you never know. If I'm Todd Orlando
on the field first.
True, but with Todd Orlando having worked with him previously at Texas, I think that also could play into it as well.
Yeah, we just haven't even seen him, and people want to see him on the other side of the ball. Like, let's see him as a receiver for a little while first. Let's get a little. Hey, real quick,
yes.
we mentioned the talent. I want to go over that real quick.
Go for it.
So, 247 Sports came out with the 2020 Team Talent Composite, and what that is every year it's a collection of everyone that was recruited on your roster. Say you brought in like the number 1 recruiting class, but half of them left. Well, the Team Talent Composite doesn't count the guys that are gone. It's only the guys that are currently on your roster. Say a 5-star transfers in, like JT Daniels did to Georgia. He counts for them, for Georgia, and doesn't count for USC anymore. And they started this in 2015. USC was number 2 in the country, then like number 3. I think number 2 twice, like number 3, number 4 a couple of times. The last year was still number 4, but that, the number 20 recruiting class from 2019 hurt them, and then the 2020 class that was number 64 certainly hurt USC a little bit. They dropped down to number 10, so this is the worst team talent composite rankings that we've seen for USC, but still first in the Pac-12. Oregon's catching up. They're number 12 right now, and they're actually probably not even that high because their roster still includes some of the opt-outs. This uses like the official rosters from every school. Some schools haven't taken out the players that have opted out for the NFL off their roster. Like USC took off Jay Tufele, so he doesn't count. But Penny Sewell is still counting for Oregon. So they might not be high as number 12. But the point is USC is still the most talented as far as like the guys they brought in from the recruiting class in the conference. And, the next 3 teams, they don't even play this year. Oregon, Washington, and then Stanford. Arizona State's considered number 5 on the team composite. UCLA 6, which seems a little high. The Utah's 7, Colorado's 8, Cal's 9. That's going to be underrated. And then Oregon State, Washington State, and Arizona. So USC's playing, the 2 worst teams as far as talent goes on their schedule. But that's just that came out. I put up a story on USCfootball.com if you want to read a little bit more about it. But if you're wondering who has the most recruiting talent in the conference, it is still USC.
Good to know. Thanks, Ryan, for the update there. Adrian on Facebook said, is Drake Jackson's hamstring injury serious? Shadi, do you have an idea about this?
I mean, it's serious enough that he's probably going to be out half their training camp. I mean, if he misses 2 weeks, I think that's something that is concerning enough there. And hamstring issues are always, a tricky thing. Yep. Because you think you've got it fixed and then you try to sprint one time and suddenly you tweak it once more and it can become a lingering thing. So a little bit of concern there, definitely, for him and Vi. And also Brew McCoy's coming off a hamstring injury. And it's interesting that you have 3 of the same injury. That's something you got to look at as a strength and conditioning staff and a training staff.
And that's something that actually happened in the beginning of training camp for USC in 2018. That's something that plagued Cam Smith the whole season long, a couple other guys too. So to me, it just jogs some memory. And it's like, this is something that seems minor in the beginning, but keep an eye out because it could just linger, like Shotgun said.
I got one on Periscope for Shotgun from AJG2114. Shotgun, have you seen Tuasivi Nomura high school film? That guy's a dude.
The question with Tuasivi Nomura is, where do you play him? And maybe in this defense, there's a position that fits him a little bit better than they'd had in the previous defense, because he didn't really fit at safety, didn't really fit at inside linebacker where they could have lined him up. So where does he play in this defense? That'll be a question. I think he's a guy that is going to be a killer on special teams. He's going to be on almost every special teams unit probably. He's a guy that you could do some versatile things with because he's a little bit of a tweener. So he's a guy to watch for, making some plays on special teams. And then do you find a position where he kind of fits? Does he become a safety in a Troy Polamalu, mold where he's up in the box a lot and doing some different things there? Can he cover enough to be a safety, or does he have to bulk up and try to be a linebacker? Those are kind of the questions you're looking at with Tuasivi.
Is he in the Raymond Scott no man's land? Would you go as far to say that?
A little bit. And the thing with Raymond Scott in particular is I saw more of him than Tuasivi, so I say this about Raymond Scott, is that he always made plays in high school. He was a tackling machine. He's not the ideal height, not the ideal shape that you want. That Clancy Pendergast was looking for from his linebackers, but he always had 8 to 10 tackles every single game for Narbonne that I saw him play. And so maybe he and Tuasivi are kind of in a similar mold where you got to have guys that are just playmakers. That's you look at the Matt Grudegoods of yonder years for USC. You got to have the guys that, maybe don't fit the mold that you're looking for an NFL first-round draft pick, but this guy just makes plays, and those are the ones that you need on game days.
Like a Max Williams, I think he's kind of one of those dudes.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Yonder years, Shotgun. Always funny when you say that.
The yonder.
We have an interesting question from Bobby on Facebook who says, what's one thing you want to remind fans about the 2020 team that they might have forgotten with the long layoff?
My answer's simple, but I don't see if you guys – my answer's simple, Brew McCoy. Yeah. I don't know if you guys have forgotten about Brew McCoy, but he's going to be really, really good.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's good. It's like, I don't know. Like, what do you I mean, I think there's so many people that are focused on Clay Helton's still the head coach. It doesn't matter. Everything. That's their Eures out there. Like, everything's terrible. The word, okay. And you can take this a couple different ways. The best teams on the schedule are no longer there. That's gone. USC's offense is going to be really good. I have a feeling the defense is going to be really good. This team could easily be 6-0. I mean, I would say they should be 6-0. They have the most talent. They play the toughest team they're going to face at home. They should be 6-0. Like, there's no reason they should lose any games in that first part of the schedule. So, yeah, I mean, don't forget that. Like, it's still a talented team. I get it. Many of you do not like who the head coach is, but they hired some really good assistants on the defensive side of the ball. We know Graham Harrell's really good at what he does. I think Sean Snyder's going to make special teams a lot better. I just think they're going to be better, and I think they're going to go undefeated.
That's what you want to remind?
I want to remind people of that because they're just, some people are just like, it's Clay Helton, the team's going to be terrible. I'm like, even if the team was like mediocre, they could still run the table. Like, that's how. It's just not that tough a schedule, you know?
I think what Ryan wants to remind people is that there's still a ton of talent on this roster that people may have forgotten about. And this may be the year they have to capitalize on it, depending on what happens with guys deciding, whether they want to be done or use that extra year of eligibility, because you got guys like Talanoa and Elijah Griffin and Isaiah Puomau and Marlon and Brandon. There's a lot of older guys, particularly on that defensive side, that could decide that they're ready to take that next step after the season, especially if they have a good year.
Yeah, that had a potential to be Ryan rant, but then it kind of just went back down. Sorry. It was close. It's okay. You're not in mid-season form. We understand.
USC Fan 1 on Periscope. Since I made the prediction, what's your prediction for USC's record this year? I think they should be 6-0. I'm going to say 5-1 because I think I'm just USC.
You can't hedge.
They should be 6-0. They should be 6-0, but I'm going to say they'll be like, if I predict what's going to happen, I'm going to say 5-1. But they should be 6-0.
Okay. Shoddy, what's your prediction?
I haven't seen a single practice, so it's hard to say.
Who cares? Just like,
I don't even know where exactly everyone is lining up on defense, so I'm not making any predictions yet.
Optimistic about the offensive line out of nowhere, so you got to choose one strategy.
I'm feeling better about the offensive line.
Keely,
okay.
what do you think, Keely?
Their record?
Yeah.
I'm going to pull Ryan and say they should be 6-0. I think they're going to go 5-1.
Yeah. I think that's probably safe.
Either ASU or Utah.
It's going to be really hard to lose more than 2 games. Like, you could see an ASU and a Utah loss. I could not see, like, losing to Arizona.
If everyone's healthy, I think that's the
Yeah,
the
I mean, if you got, like,
caveat,
some whole thing, yeah. We have an important special teams question from Irish Ice. Any word on kicking depth? Who looks good early on? Irish Ice, we can't watch, and we're really going to be wary about talking about kickers and punters because of last year. So
I learned my lesson,
but
guys.
they got 12 guys on scholarship that are kickers now. There's 5 special teams players still on scholarship, so I think they're going to be okay.
I'm going to move on to Harold's question, who says, is this offense the Kansas City Chiefs of college football? I feel like that's high praise.
They just won the Super Bowl, so
yeah. No. Shotgun?
No, they're not the same as the Kansas City Chiefs. However, I think that's what you would want to emulate, obviously, and I hope my Atlanta Falcons get Eric Bieniemy as their next head coach. Just throwing that in there, but I think that you see some positives and some similarities with the type of playmakers USC has. They've gotten adding a guy like Gary Bryant. who's a speedster, can be like a Mecole Hardman, a guy like Amon-Ra St. Brown, who's just so tough to defend. I think there's some similarities there. And if you can get the running game going, I think that's something that people forget about this Kansas City Chiefs offense, is that when the run game's going and Clyde Hilaire-Edwards is really added to that, then it makes them that much more difficult, because then they throw all the random things at you with tight end screens with Kelsey and, pitches, underhand pitches to the fullback and all kinds of the strange things like that. But it starts with the run game a lot more than people realize.
I would say maybe more like the Buffalo Bills. Like, you got Josh Allen coming in, and like it's a fun young offense. I would say it's more kind of like that. It's not, we saw them, if you watched the Tuesday night game, didn't do so well, but they're gonna have some hiccups, but they're gonna put up some points too.
Shogun, you look like you're gonna add a snarky comment.
That's fine.
Okay. Troy says USC and ASU seem to be the favorites in the South. Who has the edge, in your opinion, between quarterback Keaton Slovis and Jaden Daniels?
Keaton Slovis. I'm going with Slovis because he's the guy that put up a little bit better numbers last year. Now, both guys, you got injury concerns. They both were knocked out of some games last year. I do think that Jaden Daniels may have a little bit of an advantage this offseason because he's been able to practice more than Keaton Slovis.
Yeah, I agree there. They bring Zach Hill in from Boise State, so he's got a new offense to run where Keaton Slovis is running the same one. I'm going to give the edge to Keaton Slovis, but don't sleep on ASU. I like this coaching staff they put together. They got Marvin Lewis and Antonio Pierce running the defense, and I think coming in from Boise State, Zach Hill is going to do a nice job there. But they've got to do a lot of the kind of Clay Helton loved the OTAs, the 2 weeks prior to when fall camp started, where you could do a lot of this 11-on-11 stuff. And ASU was able to do that pretty much all summer. So they kind of had like a whole summer of OTAs. I think they got a lot done. And I don't think you can underestimate that impact. And at least will mitigate some of the risk of having new coordinators on both sides of the ball, where USC had it on just one side, ASU had it on two. So I think Jaden Daniels is going to be pretty ready to go, but I would still give the edge to Keaton.
Mm-hmm. Tony says, Keely, who's your surprise player this year? Is it cheating if I say Gary Bryant Jr.? Because it doesn't really seem like it will be a surprise, but can I say that?
Of course you can say that. That's a surprise.
Sure, Gary Bryant Jr. If not on wide receivers, definitely on, as a wide receiver, definitely on special teams. So look out for him. That's something that I wish we could see, is seeing how the new guys kind of progress in that sense, because we didn't even get to see it in spring. So
it is neat, like one of those drills, because we don't get to watch a lot. Usually they're doing things as far away as possible. But we could watch like when they're doing the kick returns and the punt returns, and there's not always. It might just be against air, but sometimes you look at a guy like, whoa, that guy looks like he was catching the ball well, or he was he had some good jitterbugs when he came out of the breaks or whatever. It's like, he looks like he would be a good returner. That was always fun to watch. You would see the freshmen come through, and they might stand out a little bit. And you're like, that's the guy to watch. He might be able to make some plays on special teams.
Mm-hmm. Francisco says, jumping into recruiting, what will make Corey Foreman commit to USC?
I think you're obviously wins and losses is going to play into that. He wants to go to a team that's winning. That's why Georgia's another team in that mix. LSU, who's coming off a national championship, is a team he's looking at. So if USC is showing growth, I think that's a big part of it. So wins and losses play into that for USC because they've struggled the last 2 years to put up the numbers they should be. And then, are you seeing improvement on the defensive line? Are the defensive linemen getting better? Are they progressing? Are they are they turning into NFL caliber players? So if Vic So'oto is showing that, a guy like Marlon Tuipulotu and Brandon Peely, if they take a big jump forward, I think that's positive when you're looking at recruiting the defensive lineman, Corey Foreman, as well as JT Tuamolola up in Washington as well.
We had a couple surprise player nominations: Hunter Echols and Abdul Malik McClain. So
yeah, I mean, I don't know if that would kind of surprise. Those are guys that we saw do some things. I mean, Abdul Malik McClain, his health is definitely something to watch out for, because when he was healthy for the various spurts, he did make plays there.
So, Keely, is there anyone that would surprise you? Because you've tried to nix both the surprise. I mean, all three people that have been potential surprise players.
Well, okay, Gary Bryant, I think, is a legitimate surprise, but he's.
And you also still try to hedge it. You're like, wait, does that even count?
No, No, I was just saying like definition of surprise because we talk about it. It's like an anticipated surprise. So is it a surprise? You know what I mean?
We have to talk about everybody, so it's going to be hard for anyone to be a surprise.
Okay,
But
I guess.
have to be like Mo Hassan will be like the surprise.
Yeah, that's a true surprise.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
We had this is for anybody. Which two gets the nod? He said node, but I think he meant nod. Elijah Griffin, Isaac Taylor Stewart, or Chris Steele.
I would say OG and Chris Steele. Shoddy?
I mean, OG's got one of the spots locked up pretty much. I mean, he was USC's best pass defender last year. He's their most experienced guy in that group because Taylor Stewart's been injured both the last 2 seasons, finished last season injured. So, he's going to lock up one of them. Now the other spot's up. And I think all 3 of those guys will play. And I'm hoping that's the case, that you see a little more rotation with some spots where there are close competitions. Rather than it be like, well, he beat you out, so you don't ever get to play, rather than saying, hey, we got 2 talented guys, we're going to get you in there some too.
Mm-hmm.
We have a true surprise from Fowler Mario. Raymond Scott will be a surprise.
True. That
would be a surprise. Yeah. It's one of those guys who are like, oh, he looks good, but we never see him, Yeah. So, yeah, guys like that would be a surprise.
Granted, without seeing practice, anyone could be a surprise,
Yeah.
really. that's the annoying thing. We don't have any context here.
Yeah.
Mike says, which freshman players do you think will get substantial playing time?
I think Gary Bryant Jr.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if you're expanding this into guys that were already on the roster, then a guy like Brew McCoy, of course. But other than Gary Bryant, you're really going, I don't know who's going to play this first year. Offensive line, you might look at it and say, hey, maybe Cortland Ford, maybe Jonah Monheim. But you got a lot of experienced guys in front of them that they're going to have to beat out. So, it just doesn't seem like those guys are necessarily going to get those opportunities. Maybe Jamar Sakona on the defensive side, just because with Jake Tufele and Jacob Lichtenstein both being out as interior linemen, but he would still have to jump over guys like Stanley Tafu and Trevor Trout in front of him, Dejon Benton. So there's some people in front of him as well. So that freshman group that they brought in, not many superstars there. And immediate impact superstars like Gary Bryant is. So you don't have the same group that you brought in the year before with like Brew McCoy and Kyle Ford and Chris Steele.
Yeah.
Ladera Dude wants to go Lane Kiffin and says, given the offensive talent, I think we should go for 2 after touchdowns. Thought? Just always go for 2. Never kick extra points.
I mean, I'm okay with the philosophy if you're going to live by it and stick to it.
And if you can do
That'd be
it.
kind of fun, yeah. It does seem a little Lane Kiffin-y, So.
Yeah, Lane Kiffin and John Baxter combined is doing the swinging gate and then trying to go for 2 by using the swing gate with your holder tossing the ball out to a tight end.
Or your quarterback wearing a punter number or whatever. Like, there's just stupid stuff. Yeah, I would much rather just go, you know what, we're just going to go for 2 all the time. Like, Oregon was doing that for a while, which is fine. I like it. If the offense is that good, just like, all right, stop us. We're going to.
Oregon was also because their kicker was that bad, wasn't it?
That might have been part of it. But, like, if the math works out right, if you can execute better than 50%, you're better off going for 2 all the time because you're going to get a little bit extra than you would if you just kick an extra point all the time.
And you're actually seeing that a little bit more in college football and NFL. The analytics are starting to filter down to football as well, that you've seen kind of take over in some other sports. And you're seeing teams go for 4th downs a lot more often. You're seeing teams potentially go for 2 a lot earlier in games, and people are freaking out. Why would you go for 2 in the 3rd quarter when you're down? Like, why not?
Yeah,
we got confidence.
There was one NFL game where they had like the tackle eligible thing. I forget which game it was.
It was the Chiefs.
Was it the Chief game?
Yeah.
Then they throws it, sideways. It was like, that was kind of cool. Like the big guy big guy 2-point conversion and stuff.
Yeah, we love
But
big man
I think they convert in the 40s. Like, I don't think they can. I don't know. I would have to see what the averages are. But if you can get close to 50% or a little bit more, and if the offense is that good and it's not that great of a schedule, that might be just a fun thing to do. Like, yep, we're going to go for 2 every time. Chase McGrath might not be too happy about it, but whatever. It's like,
I think I don't think you're going to have the situation where you don't have confidence in the kicker. When you have Chase McGrath and they have a lot of confidence in Parker Lewis coming in as well, and then having Michael Brown still on the roster. So,
yeah. All right, gentlemen, I'm pushing us into rapid fire.
Yeah, let's.
No more 2-point.
Sorry. Yeah,
you got 3 kickers on scholarship. You better be kicking the extra point.
That's true. That's
There's
very
not a lot to do.
true.
Yeah, we can wrap things up if we got a few more or whatever.
We're going into rapid fire, Mr. Abraham. First off, Ryan, the people on Facebook say that you need to eat before the show so you can tone down your food analogies and be less hungry, projecting.
I did eat right before the show.
He did. I can confirm that he did. Tom wants to know, how about special teams? What's happening there? We actually haven't heard from Sean Snyder yet, so he's the one coordinator we have not heard from yet.
Yeah, he did like a Trojans Live, I think, segment and stuff, and I had him on, or like Lunch with a Trojan show, and he was great. I mean, it was just a breath of fresh air. Hearing him, and I've been very critical of special teams over the years. I'm pretty confident things are going to go. Well, I just like his philosophies. I feel like they're going to be in pretty good hands. But we haven't got to see anything. We haven't got to talk to him yet. I don't think we will get to until next week.
Interesting. Shadi, any thoughts on special teams?
I think they'll be improved, and I think when you add a guy like Gary Bryant back there as a legit returner, then I think that with Snyder's track record, you might see some special plays this year. Mm-hmm. In a good way.
Yeah. I think it's the same category as Clancy Pendergrass. I think just a change will help that unit so much. Ryan, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No. Any word on stadium capacity from Irish Ice? Yeah, it's 0. Well, actually, they just passed. The Pac-12 said that parents, family members can go depending on local health, restrictions. Which
still
California
0
doesn't look good. Yeah. But 0 is the stadium capacity.
But this is again a time when USC kind of pushes the envelope. Liam Douglas's mother started a petition online. He's gotten over a couple thousand maybe signatures. At least over 1,000 to ask for Pac-12 parents to be able to go. And now you hear about 2 days later or a day later, Pac-12's you guys can do it if the local government says it's okay. We don't want to be the bad guy.
Yeah, they said they voted on September 24th, and it was like, we're releasing it on October 14th. It was question mark.
Make much sense,
question mark.
It doesn't surprise you though if it's true because it's the Pac-12.
Rapid fire, Mr. Gunn. Brandon says, does Helton get a pass if USC loses more than one game to the COVID mini season, or should he be gone?
I don't think he's going to be gone either way, unless it's like a disaster. Just because it's a crazy, weird season, it's short. The schedule's not going to be that hard. I don't think you're going to give him a whole lot of credit for going like 5-1 or 6-0, and I don't think you give him a lot of blame for doing worse than that. It's just a weird season. I don't think you can do much with the size of his contract and all that until 2021. Just my opinion.
I think it's going to come down to him being gone. It's because of the money. There's just too much tied up, and the fact that athletic departments are losing so much money. I don't think he's going to get a pass unless they get into the college football playoff in the other direction from USC fans. I think they'll feel like we should have won. We should have been 6-0. We should have been in the Pac-12 championship. The schedule is trash. We should have been there anyways. So I don't think they'll give him that credit, even if he deserves it at that point.
Yeah. Adrian says, question for all three of you. Who is your breakout player of the year? I feel like it's very early to name that.
Yeah, it's tough without seeing a single practice.
Not seeing any practice and only like a couple coach interviews.
Yeah. I might go with like Palier Noatote. I think he's going to have a huge season. Defensive coordinator is his position coach. He's a super talented dude. He sort of has been around, but not necessarily been like, filling up the stat sheet. I think he's going to fill up the stat sheet this year.
Shadi?
I think that's a really good guess there. If Justin Dedich gets in the line, I think a starting spot. I think he's a guy that it was a tank, so we might see some really positive things from him. And then a guy like Amon-Ra St. Brown, he's got huge numbers already, but he might be, if they get enough play games in compared to other teams, he might be a Biletnikoff finalist, like Michael Pittman was last year.
Interesting.
He's really, really good.
He is. Does that count as a breakout though?
Hey,
it's expected.
Shadi, real quick. We talked last week. Someone asked about Tyler Vaughn's getting all the records. He probably can't do it in the 6 or 7 games, right? But he could come back for 2021 and then just own all the records.
He could do that, but he's also going to be, I think, 23 years old. So it depends on what he wants to do with his life. If he thinks he has a career as a professional football player, he needs to start that.
He probably should start it. But otherwise, you'd be like, you know what? I can leave USC and I'll have every single receiving record possible. It'd be pretty funny.
Does that make you the same amount of money as the NFL does? That's the question.
No, but
You have some bragging rights, I guess. Yeah. My breakout player is Brew McCoy. I'll say he is fighting to get on the field and will be angry and do well. That's my theory. Not a very articulate theory, but there we go. Tom says, what time will your alarms go off on game day?
If we're
9 a.m.
For that 9 a.m. game, woo!
Yeah.
Well, it depends on what we're allowed to do. If we can be there, it's going to be significantly
True.
earlier.
That's a good point.
We're usually there 2 or 3 hours ahead of time in the press box, or at least I am. And I'd probably be
Shade.
similar. Well, yeah. You guys roll up late. But, so I don't know. Well, Shotgun won't go to bed.
Shotgun has things to do and people to see before the game, but yes.
Yes.
But that won't happen this season.
Yeah, it's going to be a completely
Probably
different
6.
season.
I'll go 6 a.m. I'll just guess.
That's when you're going to wake up?
Probably.
Oh, wow.
It's going to be a completely different season. I usually stop by and see friends before games, and then go in and we're looking to see which recruits are at games. Those things aren't going to be happening. It's going to be basically okay when the team is ready to come out of the, to see who's active and who's practicing. That's what time we'll need to be at the stadium. But I still will probably stay up all night on Thursday, so that I will go to bed really early on Friday and then wake up at 4 or 5 in the morning.
Weird.
Yeah. The weird thing, so if you guys want to check it out, I do an art cast with Dr. Bartner. It's on the USC Trojans, their Facebook page and their YouTube page and stuff. And it's been great talking to him once a week. We're going to do a 12-episode deal, and the band will not be there. And it's a Pac-12 decision. And just when we went over the in-game traditions of what the band does, and running through the tunnel, and when they play when the players are coming out and they're warming up, and then when the players leave the field, the band's right there doing their pregame show, and the drum major comes out and stabs the field. And thinking about being at a game and none of that being there, how dead that's going to be.
Weird.
I would do a lot of times pregame from the press box. I would broadcast live, on our Facebook page or YouTube page or whatever, just from my phone, and show everyone. Here's what the pregame festivities are, because they don't show that on television. All that stuff is going to be gone. I think it's just going to feel so weird. The no fans is one thing, but the pomp and circumstance of what they do, it's this regimented pregame stuff that you get used to, and that's all going to be gone. Now, they won't be blaring music, I assume, through the speakers and stuff. Remember, because it's hard to even hear in the press box.
I feel like that's more incentive to blare the music. You need to make up for that. Yeah.
But there's no fans there to blare. Oh man, it's so you can't even talk in the press box. It's so loud. It's crazy.
Old man says, "What? No."
Cloud, get out of here.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly the phrase you used. The pomp and circumstance of this game is going to be completely different. There's no song girls. Is Traveler even going to be a part of it? I don't know if that's going to be allowed. But his handlers can. So
it was just a question.
I think it says no mascots. I think that's not allowed. I don't think
it's just a wild horse riding through. What's the big deal?
Yeah.
That's not a mascot. That's a symbol.
Okay, we need to get back on track. We're losing it over here. Danny says, "Do you think Taylor Katoa will be ready after having a 2-year mission?"
Really hard to say. He does look pretty thick, from seeing him in the background, some video and stuff. But where he's at, physically and mentally, that's hard to really say until we see some practice or see enough clips to be able to make a determination there.
Mm-hmm. Guy says, "Is Larry Scott any closer to being fired?"
I was thinking about this today. Some people were asking
that?
me. So his contract's up 2022. I think the Pac-12, that the right thing to do is to get rid of him now, and then you want someone in place because 2024 is the big year. That's the TV contract stuff. You need to start that a couple years ahead of time. You'd like to have someone in place for a little while before that gets going. I just don't see the Pac-12. I feel like they're going to do something where it's they're not going to renew him. They're going to let it. They'll talk about it. They're just mutually decided to part ways. Larry Scott can go off on his own, and they'll bring somebody in. The right thing to do would be to fire him, though, probably after the season. I just don't think they're going to do it. I think they're sort of going to let it just peter out, and they both just part ways when his contract is over.
Do you feel like he bought himself some time by the way he handled the coronavirus? Because there was a window where we were praising Larry Scott and the Pac-12.
He did well for that part, but that's basically he did well because that was the easy thing to do, is to shut things down. That was easy to do, but that was easy for him. But once it became clear, hey, everyone else is going forward, he was still in we really wanted to shut down, so we're going to keep with that. I mean, the John Wilner report that came out, and it really praised USC's players for writing that letter to Gavin Newsom. That was the catalyst going on. But the presidents were talking about basketball returning instead of football. They were like, no, football's still going to go in January, but we might be able to do basketball sooner. Like, that's the mentality. Like, that's completely wrong. Yeah, you can worry about basketball, but football is the most important thing. If everyone else is going forward with football, you can't put that on the back burner, and that's what the Pac-12 did. So any goodwill, a couple of weeks of goodwill, that's all gone. Like, it's just, he's just made bad decisions, and the Pac-12 needs to move on.
Mm-hmm. Shawty, I know you could go on a Larry Scott rant, but I'm going to save you from doing that. Jay says, does COVID level the playing field for SC by reducing other teams' ability to prepare?
Let's just say that USC is in such a low level of preparedness. I think the teams are going to be able to prepare like normal. It's just going to be with more precautions now. Now that everyone has basically started back up, Cal, Stanford, all the schools have started back up. I think everybody's back on the even playing field. I don't think anyone's necessarily much lower than other schools.
Final question comes from Mark. He says, with the Pac-12's lower game count, does USC have to be dominant in their undefeatedness to have any chance of making the playoffs?
100%. Yeah. I mean, not only undefeated, but dominant. Really come out against ASU, spank Utah on the road, obviously blow out the Arizonas and the Colorados and stuff, and really handle what you hope is a 6-0 Oregon team that has a lot of talent too. And show everyone, hey, and you're probably going to need some more Florida LSU postponements, cancellations, things like that, where, we don't know if Florida's going to be able to play. They've already postponed that LSU game. They might not be able to play Missouri the next week. If you have a few of those, and Florida's a good team. If the Alabamas or the Georgias, they lose a game or two along the way, then that's kind of a little bit more of an even playing field. So you need a lot of stuff to kind of happen. But to take care of business on the USC side or whoever from the Pac-12, yeah, you got to dominate that schedule. There's no they this close one against Colorado. You can't have anything like that. You just have to show everyone, wow, this team just blew away the entire Pac-12. They are clearly the best team in the Pac-12. That's the only way you would even consider them being part of a 14 playoff.
Mm-hmm. More important than all of that is to take care of business themselves around the field, around the dorms and stuff, so they don't lose any games, and keep all your own student athletes healthy. I think that's more important, because if you don't get to 6 or 7 games, then if you're playing 4 to 5, there's definitely no chance you're not even in consideration. So I think you got to take care of your stuff first, and then you see how everything else plays out. But you take care of yourself, and you try to run up the score for once, and actually be able to accomplish that, which is something USC has really struggled with under Clay Helton. And hey, that'd be great for the development of those younger players, and that's what people like Corey Foreman want to see, is development. Those things all tie in together and work their way up the ladder if you do it. So I think that there's a ton of good things that can come out of it if USC can do that.
Mm-hmm. All righty, gentlemen. Any final thoughts before we wrap it up for tonight's show?
I wanted to say another breakout player I thought of is Marquise Stepp. A lot of people love throwing his name out there a lot, but he actually hasn't played that much, doesn't have a ton of yardage or touchdowns. When he's been in there, he's looked good, but he's been injured and banged up and hasn't played a ton in his career so far. So he could be a guy that breaks out if he can get healthy.
That's a good point. I mean, that Notre Dame game was kind of is he breaking out? And then he got injured the very next game. So he's had those flashes, but can he really stay healthy and capitalize? We shall see.
Yeah. I would just say, make sure you're checking out USCfootball.com. These guys are doing a great job with the coverage. A ton of content going up for even practices we can't see, but a lot of analysis, a lot of insight, a lot of stories, podcasts, videos like this. So make sure you're checking out the site. There's a ton of stuff going up there. We are counting down to the kickoff for 2020 for USC, November 7th. So it's getting closer.
Crazy. Football for real in 2020?
Football.
Wow. Exciting. I'm excited, guys. Alrighty, that's going to wrap it up for tonight's show. That's Ryan. That's Chacum. I'm Keely. We'll see y'all next week. Bye.